It was a chilly autumn evening when Richard Kingsley, a reclusive millionaire known for his business acumen but rarely for his charity, did something completely out of character. As he left an upscale restaurant, he handed $500 to a beggar sitting on the sidewalk, her frail hands shivering from the cold. He hadn't thought much of it, just a random act of kindness. But the next day, when Richard saw her surrounded by police officers and a crowd gathered in shock, he never could have imagined the dark, twisted truth that would unravel. Richard Kingsley was the epitome of wealth and success. Owner of several real estate firms and investment companies, his face was often plastered across business magazines. Yet, despite his vast fortune, Richard was known as a cold, calculating man who rarely interacted with those beneath his social standing. At 40 years old, he had lived his life solely focused on wealth accumulation, leaving behind relationships, friends, and even his own family. The city knew him for his lavish parties and ruthless business deals but not for his compassion. However, something strange had been stirring in Richard's mind lately, an emptiness, a hollow feeling despite his opulence. It was as though life had become a string of meaningless luxuries. One evening, after a high-profile meeting at an exclusive downtown restaurant, Richard stepped out into the cold night air. He was about to call his chauffeur when something caught his eye. A woman, in tattered clothing, was sitting at the corner of the street. Her eyes, large and tired, reflected the city lights, and her thin frame trembled as she clutched an old blanket around herself. Her head was bowed down, and a small, torn cardboard sign lay in front of her that simply read, "Help, please." Richard glanced at her and, in a moment of strange spontaneity, pulled out his wallet. His fingers fumbled for a bill, and without a second thought, he handed her $500. She looked up in disbelief, her eyes wide, speechless, and unsure whether to thank him or not. Before she could say a word, Richard had walked away. He barely remembered the interaction, just another random act, perhaps to quell that gnawing emptiness. The next morning, Richard awoke with little thought of the night before. As usual, his day began with checking his stock portfolio, reviewing business proposals, and lining up calls for the day. His life was a well-oiled machine of meetings and profits. But during a mid-morning break, while flipping through the local news channel, his attention was caught by a startling scene broadcast live. The screen showed police officers surrounding a homeless woman near the same street where Richard had seen the beggar. And to his shock, it was the same woman he had given money to the night before. Curiosity piqued, Richard grabbed his coat and headed downtown. When he arrived, a crowd had gathered, whispering in confused tones as the police continued questioning the woman. Her frail frame was shaking, not from the cold, but from the overwhelming situation. Officers were searching her small makeshift camp, and some of them looked particularly concerned as they exchanged hushed words. "What's going on?" Richard overheard a man beside him asking. "The cops are investigating her," another responded. "Rumor is, she was found with a stash of cash, more than any beggar should have." Richard's heart skipped a beat. Could they be talking about the $500 he'd given her? Surely, that was no crime. He edged closer, trying to get a better view. Just as he approached, the police officers escorted the woman to a patrol car. She was crying now, pleading her innocence, but her words were drowned out by the murmurs of the crowd. "I swear, I didn't steal it," she shouted, but the officers weren't convinced. Feeling uneasy, Richard decided to follow up at the police station. He didn't want to get involved, but something inside him urged him to uncover the truth. When he arrived at the station, he overheard officers discussing the case. One of them was holding a small leather pouch, clearly the center of attention. She had this hidden under her belongings, the officer explained. And it's not just $500, it's thousands. Looks like she's been running a scam. Richard's stomach dropped. Thousands? That couldn't be right. He had only given her a single bill, and now they were talking about a hidden fortune. Something didn't add up. Determined to find out more, Richard approached one of the officers. I gave her the $500, he admitted. But I don't know anything about thousands of dollars. The officer raised an eyebrow. You? Why would a millionaire like you be giving out money to a homeless woman? Richard didn't have a clear answer. It seemed absurd, even to him. It was just a random act of kindness. But I swear, that's all I gave her. I didn't know anything about this other money. The officer looked skeptical but decided to investigate further. They reviewed footage from nearby security cameras and found something even more shocking. After Richard had handed the woman the $500, she had been approached by a mysterious man. He had lingered nearby, watching their interaction, and as soon as Richard left, he had slipped a package into the woman's belongings. Richard's eyes widened as the truth slowly unfolded. This wasn't about the beggar at all, she had been framed. The police investigation revealed that the mysterious man was part of a criminal network. They used unsuspecting homeless individuals to launder money and smuggle illegal goods, hiding their transactions in plain sight. The beggar woman had been an innocent pawn, caught in a web of deceit without even realizing it. Richard, racked with guilt, worked with the authorities to clear her name. He offered to pay for her legal representation and ensured she had a safe place to stay while the investigation continued. Over the following weeks, as the truth came to light, Richard found himself visiting the woman frequently. Her name was Angela, and she had fallen on hard times after losing her job and home in a string of unfortunate events. Richard's initial act of charity had unintentionally thrust her into a nightmare, but now he was determined to help her get back on her feet. In a strange twist of fate, the man who had once been cold and distant now found himself caring for someone he had barely known. He helped Angela find a job, gave her financial support, and even connected her with a rehabilitation program for others who had been victims of the criminal ring. Through it all, Richard realized that money alone could not fill the emptiness in his life. It was in helping others, in forming genuine human connections, that he found the meaning he had been searching for. The experience changed him profoundly, and he vowed to continue using his wealth not just for himself, but for those in need. The end.